Welcome. It's been a bit since we last met together, and now we're finally getting into, well, the build up for the Council of Nicaea. I'm going to see how fast we can do this, but I also don't necessarily want to skip some of the important details, because today well, not hopefully, I guess, but we're going to be covering the greatest persecution that hit the Christian church in the early period of our history. But to explain that, I have to first really go through the map, which is why I had to redraw a lot of the map, because there's going to be some major changes that are going on. Yeah. So to kind of recap, there was a persecution, the Decian persecution, in the early 250s AD, and that was very hurtful to the Christian church. But following that, there was a time of peace for the Christian church, about almost 40 years, where the church did not face any major persecutions. There were incidents here and there, but no major persecutions. But this was also following a period where there was massive instability within the politics of Rome. So within the 3rd century, so beginning with Alexander Severus, beginning of the 200s, and then going to the emperor that we're going to be studying today, Diocletian, there were a few dozen emperors within 1 century. I think the average length of reign was maybe 5 years. And then you either fell death to the plague. That was a few of them. Death in battle, that was also a few of them. Or assassination, which was about 2/3 of them at least. So there was not a natural death in the office of emperor for about a century. It did not happen. Why do people want to be emperor? For the potential glory, anyways. Yeah, and there was only a few emperors that really lasted more than 6 years. Just a handful. So when we get to the fellow that we're starting at today, he's going to try and revolutionize things so he doesn't die in office. So I was like, okay, yeah, this makes sense. It makes sense why you're trying to change the face of the empire if you're trying to make sure that you actually have a government for the empire.
But he's only protecting himself from assassination, because he could have still died from the plague, and he still could have died in battle.
A little bit, but he's also understanding the natural limitations of nations, where you need to really organize the people and the economy. So as we get into him a little bit, I'm going to talk about how he's trying to divvy tasks up in the empire.
You refer to that period where there was no persecution?
Very, very little.
Okay. Was that due to anybody decreeing that, or was it simply nobody bothered?
Nobody bothered.
Okay.
That was the thing. Nobody cared. Because
it had nothing to do with the fact that the government supported the Christians.
Absolutely not. Yeah. Though there was a curious incident which I covered a few weeks ago, where there was a heretic that the Christian church in the area couldn't deal with, so they actually asked the emperor to try and do his emperor duty and actually discern what to do, which is very weird for Christians to ask a secular ruler about this. But quite thankfully, he just asked the Christians in his home province, and then like the bishops in his home province, and then they were able to give him guidance. So
it's funny when we kind of snicker that they only lasted 5 years. In our American system, you elect people for 4 years.
I know, yeah, but hopefully that doesn't end in death. Hopefully. There were a few presidents who died in office, but those were also almost all in their natural processes. There's only Lincoln and
That's the difference.
Kennedy.
Kennedy. I know that were killed in office that way.
But yes, times haven't changed any.
We're gonna get to
Oh,
Diocletian today,
Humanity hasn't changed.
and he started office in 284 AD. So, yeah, he took over. He was, as per usual with these fellows, military man.
Mhm.
Yeah, so he was fighting primarily on this border of the Roman Empire. So this is the Germanic border, so he was fighting against different Germanic peoples, as emperors do. And when he came to office, he recognized pretty early on, well, all the emperors reigning solo, everybody mutinies against them and kills them. So I'm going to look to one of my best buds in the army, so one of his fellow officers, and he grabbed Maximian, who was a very capable gentleman in terms of war. Well, I shouldn't call him a gentleman, as we'll later understand, but very capable military man. And they started co-reigning in 285. Now, I'm going to throw some terms at you, and this might be confusing, so I do apologize. But we do have the emperor. So the emperor is the one who's ruling everything, okay? When Diocletian gets Maximian, he now wants him as co-emperor, but now he gives him a very specific title. And this title is Caesar.
I thought it was deputy chief prime minister.
Deputy prime minister, yeah, sure. But no, he gets to be called Caesar.
He creates the term.
Yeah. Then he takes for himself the title Augustus. And this basically sets the tone for all future occupants of the office, at least in the Western Roman Empire, and I'm going to explain that in a minute.
So Emperor Augustus.
No, he's taking the title Augustus. So you don't, so we use the term emperor for ease of use, but he just calls himself Augustus. So he's the Augustus, he's the one who's on top. And then the one who reigns immediately below him is the Caesar. Yeah. And that's what sets the tone for how you understand the emperors within the Roman Empire from that day forward. Is if you are the lead emperor, you're the Augustus. If you're the subordinate emperor, you're the Caesar. So Diocletian basically says to Maximian, you're going to be the Caesar, and you get to fight on my behalf. You have to look after the military affairs. I'm going to focus more on administration. So Diocletian tries to do more the civil matters. Maximian tries to do more of the military matters. And Maximian is really good at his job, so he's actually able to defend this border and not die in office. Diocletian, on the other hand, he kind of gets swept up in military affairs himself, and well, fortunately, unfortunately. And what ends up happening is there's this Persian Empire over here, and they've been battling against the Romans for quite some time. In fact, they're responsible for a few of the very short terms of other emperors. So what Diocletian has to do is he has to try and defend this border. So Diocletian goes into the east here. Maximian focuses more on the west over here. And they don't really talk to each other for years. They just don't, because one is so occupied over here, the other so occupied over here. But what ends up happening is that Maximian, since he's so focused over here, says, you know what? I'm Augustus now. And he is not saying, I am the only emperor. He's saying, I am the head emperor over here. So that happens only a couple of years after 285. So he does this in 286, and it becomes well known to Diocletian shortly afterwards in 287.
The chase power.
Yeah. So what would you expect to happen if somebody declares himself emperor but in a different part of the empire? Right? Yeah. You would expect that, but Diocletian's actually intelligent. Yeah, I know, it's surprising that you have an intelligent emperor for a change, at least for this century. So what Diocletian decides to do when he meets Maximian is legitimizes his claim. And what they end up doing is they divide the empire in half.
Oh, it's not, no, yeah.
Yeah, so Diocletian makes up this system where he basically just divides the entire empire in half. So you have the Western Roman Empire, you have the Eastern Roman Empire. And this works. In fact, this is the dominant way the empire is going to divide for the next 1,200 years.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
It's the way it's gonna exist.
Yeah. Like there's going to be a little bit of change when we get to Emperor Constantine, because he takes the whole kit and caboodle again.
Yeah.
But since he divides it between his three sons, it's a bit out of sorts for a while until they basically retain or get back to the system. But this is basically how the empire is going to function for the next 1,200 years. Well, at least this side. This side falls, but this one will survive. So the Byzantine emperors or Eastern Roman empires, they're going to survive for quite some time. And this is actually going to outlast this side by about 1,000 years.
So there's no border skirmishes and things like that?
Not between the East and the West, no. There's going to be differences of opinions between the two emperors, but otherwise pretty peaceful. Yeah. Yeah, so this happens 287. You have a big division right there. And this is also important for understanding how things are going to work out on the way to the Council of Nicaea, especially with Constantine and what he's trying to do afterwards. But division. However, once you start getting a division in there, you also think to yourself, well, I would still like somebody co-reigning with me, because you still have the problem of single emperors dying out.
How did this impact Christianity?
We're getting to that.
Okay, is it all on one side or?
No, Christianity spread around some of the major population centers in the empire.
So this division did create problems?
I'm getting to that. This is built up to the persecution. So once you have this division, you have the Augusti, which is the plural Augustus. So Augusti, so Diocletian on this side. And Paul might know this one. Where would you expect him to reign if he's looking at the Eastern? Like what would be his capital? What would you expect?
Antioch or
not Antioch. Definitely not. Well, Jerusalem's a barren wasteland now. They destroyed it 200 years earlier. Jerusalem doesn't get rebuilt until the medieval period, basically, or not fully rebuilt. So Diocletian actually ranged from a place called Nicomedia. So where would you expect Maximian on this side of the map to actually reign?
oh,
You expect Rome. No. He actually moves the capital to Milan. Or if you're using the ancient name, it's Mediolanum. But we'll just say Milan for ease of use. So yeah, actually Milan becomes the capital of the Roman Empire in the West or, well, basically this time forward, actually. Rome kind of fades out of importance for quite some time. Sometimes it becomes more important, then it kind of gets humbled, then it comes back into importance, then it gets humbled again. But everybody ruling on this side, trying to revitalize the Roman West, the vast majority of them will actually be stationed in Milan.
What is that in modern terms that,
That's Milan in modern terms.
okay.
Yeah, the ancient name is Mediolanum.
Okay.
Mediolanum,
Yeah.
sorry. So Diocletian, he's Augustus in Media. He has Galerius, his Caesar, Maximian. He rules from Milan. He has Constantius.
Oh.
Oops,
Okay.
spell that correctly. There we go.
Yeah.
Constantius
Okay.
as his Caesar. And this name will remind you of Constantine. That's because this is Constantine's father. But we're not quite at that yet. And once you have two more Caesars in there, they're going to decide, hey, we should divide this up again instead of just doing administrative military stuff. So you have now Constantius ruling Britain and Gaul, the less profitable parts of this side of the empire. And you have Constantius ruling Greece, more or less. Greece and the Balkans. Oh, sorry, Galerius. Galerius is, yeah. Constantius is ruling this, Galerius this, Diocletian this. So you actually have the empire divided into four. So this is going to be important for how things are done, especially with how the persecution starts breaking out. But you have all this set in place by the mid-290s. Okay? So massive division in terms of how politics are done. Same thing here in Canada. Like, the politics in BC are not the politics of Alberta or Saskatchewan.
So the purpose for the division, is it going to be the growth of the number of people?
No, it's for administration and defense.
Administration of people.
Administration of the economy for the people, yes.
Okay, because like what the job is getting to be too, usually you divide because the job is too big for you.
Yeah.
So, or you can divide strategically to defend the country, right? So is that why they divided it?
Yeah, so there's military goals where you have multiple incursions along the borders.
You're afraid of an invasion from somebody.
Well, you're not necessarily afraid of, because these are actively happening. From the beginning of their reigns, they are always in combat. There's never a time when there's not a border skirmish somewhere. And for the first 14 years, at least for Diocletian anyways. So this is always an active war zone. This is an active war zone. So they want to make sure we can actually pay attention to this, especially when you're fighting on two fronts. And you also want to make sure the day-to-day stuff gets run, like all the trade agreements, public policies, stuff like that. So it's not about population growth, it's about properly administering and keeping the country intact. Yeah. Okay. So that's the groundwork of this. I need some space. I'm going to get rid of the Black Sea for now, because that won't be important for the Roman Empire for another few hundred years. Okay. Now we get into the issue of what's called the Diocletian persecution. So this dude. But since some of the Christian writers at the time were also writing when he was still in power, some of them were kind of just defaulting it to Galerius and going like, no, it was this guy's job. We're not fighting against the Augustus, we're fighting against the lesser guy, the Caesar. theological combat. But you have the Diocletian persecution. And you can argue that its roots begin in 295, but I'll begin in 299. So in 299.
And does the persecution exist only in the area where he's responsible for it?
I'm getting to that. Because that's why I'm dividing this up, so you know what's going on as we divide this. Okay, so in 299. The Persian War ends, at least for now. So this border is secure. The far eastern border is secure. And this is very happy because that has been an area of conflict for about 70 years. They end it. And now they celebrate, they have to offer up sacrifices to pagan gods. So Diocletian, Galerius, both military men, they both know these Christians. But the Christians, they're not offering up pagan sacrifices. In fact, they're hanging off to the side, making the sign of the cross. And from at least one of the sources that I was reading, it was saying that this actually messed up the rituals that were being done, because these were rituals trying to look forward in time to try and predict things, so that they know what could happen later on. And then the Christians off to the side praying and making the sign of the cross disrupted these pagan rituals. You go, well, interesting. Does that mean that you were actually praying to demons, parading around as pagan deities, praying to the one true God disrupted them? Anyways, something to consider. But Diocletian and Galerius, who are looking at these Christians hanging off to the side, making the sign of the cross, praying, were thinking that this was an act of insubordination.
They've been doing this all along.
Not in front of them.
Same thing.
But
Christians never change their practices.
no, they don't.
So they've been doing.
But that's also why you have some of the other persecutions, is that Christians don't change their practice. They're not going to offer sacrifices to pagan gods. So that was the issue with the big persecution and the stubborn persecution at the beginning of the 3rd century was Christians would offer pagan sacrifices, so they were arrested and executed, including some of the big name guys. A lot of the bishops died. In the middle of the century, in the 250s, the Decian persecution, Christians also wouldn't offer up sacrifices to pagan gods. This one, they weren't automatically killed. They were actually brought into prison and tortured to the point of death to try and make them offer up sacrifices. So that was how Origen of Alexandria died. So he also was from the torturer's practice. So again, a lot of big name figures died. This is not going to be any exception. Is Christians are not going to offer up sacrifices to pagan gods, so they're going to be rounded up.
They're becoming accepted, right?
Yeah. So this is actually being genuinely concerning for the military leaders, and this doesn't really come into effect until 303, specifically February 23rd. And this is consequently also why February is called February. So I don't know, do you know why February is called February? No? Okay, so it's actually named after the festival to a pagan deity called Terminus. So the actual festival is, if I remember my Latin correctly, Fevrius, or Februarius, I can't remember. But it's named after this festival to this pagan deity, Terminus. Terminus, what do you think that means?
Ending something.
Ending something, yes. So, February 23rd, 303, Diocletian decides on this festival, he's going to try and end Christianity. So, what he does is he burns down the major church in Nicomedia.
Oh,
So he burns this down, orders all the scriptures to be burned, and the next day, he puts out the first edict. There's going to be 4 in total, and none of them are going to be good. But the first edict he puts out is Christians, they are insubordinate. They will not sacrifice to our gods. Therefore, they can't be trusted in any public office, because any public official needs to have the favor of the gods. So all Christians are now denied rights to be in any public office. All Christians are expelled from the military and from the government. So now you have no Christians in positions of power throughout the empire. So it's because when he has this edict, the edicts are supposed to be for the entire empire.
Just his side or the whole?
It's supposed to be for the whole empire, but I'll get into that in a little bit.
What did the other 3 have to say about this?
I'll get into that. I need to finish off what's in the edict. So they're expelled from positions of power. And I need to quickly check those. You are also denied any public assembly for worship, even private assembly. You cannot have worship of this Christian God. Yeah. Any Christians freed from slavery, so the freedman social class, you now have that right revoked. So now all of you can be taken slaves at no cost. Yeah. And this is also one of the kickers. The last right taken away is you cannot appeal any of this in court. You have no right to go to court and try to work any of this out. So basically, they just stripped an entire religion of any civil rights. Yeah. Yeah, this is bad. But in addition to the stripping of civil rights, he also puts in that edict any Christian scriptures that are found must be burned. So he's trying to end Christianity, not necessarily, not at this point anyways, not by trying to go out and just murder everybody, but try to, your persona non grata, you have no rights, you are not a person in the eyes of the law, and all the things that teach you your religion, I am destroying. Yeah. So Diocletian is the one who makes this, possibly at the urging of Galerius. So absolutely, this is going on in the East, full force in the East. Not as much in the West. Maximian wants to support Diocletian in this. So he has it, but he's not going to go out for blood necessarily. He's not going to really try to force this in. Constantius over here, yeah, he doesn't enforce it at all. It's proclaimed, but he doesn't enforce it. Woo, Constantius. Yeah. So you kind of see a gradual fade in intensity of the persecution, and that's going to keep its way for the entirety of this period. It's going to be going on full force here, out for blood. Medium force here, not necessarily out for blood, but they're definitely going to try and catch you. Here does not exist, basically. In effect, it does not exist. These edicts are being proclaimed, of course, because this has to be in the empire, but it's not going to be enforced. So, woohoo, Constantius. And yeah, we're going to see this later on with Constantine, where Constantine is extremely favorable to Christianity over time. So while these edict, like the first edict is really against Christianity, this is the first persecution that's like really targeting Christians. The other edicts were just like, well, if you're not offering sacrifices, you have to be punished. And since Christians and Jews were the only ones doing that. They just happened to be victims of it.
How long did it last?
This is targeting Christians. Oh, it's going to get worse before it gets better. So later on this year, we have second edict. So still in 303, possibly the summer. We don't have a date for this one, unfortunately. The second edict. Just double check my notes. Yeah. So first edict, since you stripped people of their civil rights, what is the logical course of action that people will follow?
The protest.
Exactly. But this is not a non-violent protest. People are out in the streets and they are really trying to champion this. They're an active rebellion. There are many different rebellions across the Eastern Empire. Not as much Western because, well, it's a lot more relaxed here, but massive rebellions across the board. So the next step is, hey, you're rebelling against us. Why don't we try to get rid of all the people who are possibly leading you to revolt? So let's lock up all clergy. I mean all clergy. Every single priest, every single bishop, everybody. Even the lectors are being arrested. So massive arrests all over the board. Prisons are overflowing. Yeah, it is not good. And the people now do not have the clergy to remind them of, say, 1 Peter or Romans chapter 3, which is telling you, oh yeah, pray for your leaders and respect them even in times of persecution. Now the people have nobody to tell them that. They don't even have the lectors to read from the Bible to tell them that. They're still revolting. So this is where you get the third edict, and that is in November 20th. So later on. So the third edict. What's going on is I'll put in here, first edict, no rights. Scripture is burned. Second edict, clergy arrest. Third edict is force clergy to sacrifice. So kind of realizing that the second edict didn't really help matters. Sacrifice. Okay. The second edict didn't really help that matters. The third edict, basically what it does is it's saying, okay, well, we have all these guys in prison, and to calm the people, let's just force their leaders to make sacrifices to the pagan gods, and then the people will calm down. So basically convince them it's okay, more or less. So they take the clergy and go, okay, offer up these sacrifices. Now, some of the clergy, they do this, they abandon the faith, and they offer up sacrifices. Other clergy, they are offering up sacrifices under threat of torture, or they are being tortured and forced to do this. There's actually one case where, one reported case anyways, where somebody was taken and people were working their hands to offer up a sacrifice to a pagan god. So I think that person, like, he can get by with saying, like, no, I really did not want to do this. So forgive me.
They're not dying as martyrs.
That's the next one. Some of them are dying in prison, but not a ton of them. But the fourth edict. So this is in 304. Basically, I'll say, well, how to phrase this in very short terms. I'll just say mass execution. So they're not just going out and killing everybody willy-nilly, of course. Because that makes absolutely no sense from any political view. Like the genocides that we find in the 20th century, like no, people were that insane. Well, some people were in the ancient period. But Diocletian definitely not that insane. But what he's doing in the fourth edict is saying, everybody must sacrifice. Every single person in the empire must offer a sacrifice in public. It is a communal sacrifice together. If you're not part of this sacrifice, you are to be executed. This is where we get mass Christian death across the empire. Again. But heavily enforced, wildly enforced, not enforced. Yeah, Constantius does not try to kill anybody. He recognizes that these are empire-wide edicts, but he's not enforcing it where he is. Maximian, he goes, yeah, that's a good idea, and he does it. But yeah, it's not enforced. So you were asking how long this was going on. So we have Diocletian and Maximian. So I'll put an R there for reign. He begins 284, begins 285. They actually retire. Both of them retire in 305. And this is also almost unheard of. You don't have a Roman emperor retiring for a very, very long time. Tiberius, second emperor, he retires. But since then, you don't really get anybody who retired. So this is almost unheard of that the emperors just give up. Diocletian, like he's not under threat. Either is Maximian. They're not under threat, but they decide to retire. They just want to live off to the side. They don't want to think about public life anymore. They just retire.
Make that fortune.
Yeah. So, since these guys retire, their subordinates, who were subordinate emperors, the Caesars, they now become the senior emperors. They become the Augusti. Galerius hates Christians. Constantius does not hate Christians. So, in 305, in the Western Empire, like the persecution ends. It just ends. Constantius has no real desire to continue it, so it just ends. Galerius, he still wants to do this, so it continues on until he retires. He dies a few days later, basically, but he retires and dies in 311.
Oh, yeah.
For 6 years.
So that brings up-
Well, no,
Well,
8
he-
years, 8 years, 8 years.
Okay, so that brings up Constantine.
Yeah, so, oh, I have to check who their Caesars are. Oh boy. I didn't write down their Caesars when, anyways, I could look this up. I'm not going to look this up in the middle of class, but you have another Caesar ranked emperor in the West, and another Caesar ranked emperor in the East. If I remember correctly, his name is Maximius, but I'm not entirely sure. I can't remember right now. Sorry for everybody watching this online. Yeah, you have Constantius who's looking up at this. Constantius actually dies partway through. He gets replaced with Constantine. So Constantine takes over when his father is no longer able to work. No, sorry, no, Maximius is the one on this side. Yeah, that's right. No, no, wait, no, I know. Oh, it is, okay, no, yeah, Maximius is the successor here. He's the jerk that has to be undone, okay. So Galerius, when he's about shortly before he dies, in 311, he gets another edict. Unfortunately. So in 311, we have the Edict of Toleration. Yay! So basically in that short edict, which actually survived, you can even look it up if you want to, it's about a page long. But the Edict of Toleration, basically what Galerius says is, well, the Christians haven't really committed massive harm to the empire. They're not backtracking on this, even though we keep killing all of them. That part isn't exactly the edict that we can't kill so many of them. But basically, he's saying, since the Christians were persecuted for so long and they're not backtracking, let's just tolerate their religion. So you don't have to kill them for not offering up sacrifices to pagan gods, but now it is legally required for all Christians to pray for the empire, its people, and its prosperity. It's legally required. And then I bet a whole bunch of Christians were like, we were doing that anyways. But, because yeah, that's in the Bible. It's to pray for your government. So basically the Edict of Toleration goes, you have to do this. You have to pray. Maximius, of course, he doesn't care about this. So once he takes hold of his side, shortly after Galerius dies, he's like, but I like persecuting Christians. So then he kills a whole bunch of anyways until he's taken out of office in 313. Okay. Sorry, there was a lot being thrown at you.
I'll just start by that line. I mean, it's kind of obvious today too. The East and the West division. I don't know if that's the cause of it, but it's certainly.
Sort of. Because it's actually like the division was pretty natural. Simply because I'll use green for this. The lingua franca here is Greek.
Yeah.
Lingua franca here is Latin. Now, of course, you have a whole bunch of other languages being spoken all over the place. But generally, if you wanted to communicate in public, Greek, Latin. Even in Africa, with Cyrene there, that's a Greek colony. Greek. Even in Egypt here, the predominant language is Coptic, which is a version of Greek. The offhand languages are more in this area. So you have Aramaic, you have Syriac, you have a number of other languages. But generally, if you're educated, you know Greek. So even the disciples of Jesus, they were never, well, most of them weren't educated at all. They were like fishermen, so they weren't in public institutions, but they knew Greek. They could speak Greek. It was easy. Maybe not terribly well, but they could speak Greek. And here, generally, yeah, you would be speaking Latin, especially as if you wanted to be in any high up office, you needed to know Latin because the Romans ran the show. But you still have various Germanic and Celtic languages being spoken all over the place here.
In the Vatican, they still speak Latin to this day.
Sorry?
In the Vatican, in Rome, they still speak Latin to this group.
Yeah. Well, yeah, after the fall of the empire in the West, Latin was seen as the cultured language. It was also the language of the church and the Bible. So once you get the Latin translation of the Bible, the Vulgate, that's seen as, well, the way that you would understand scripture, speak scripture, and order worship. So the church in Rome, and this is kind of a gradual thing, but the church in Rome basically says, well, you have to worship in Latin. So by the time of Charlemagne's empire, so Charlemagne was in the 8th century AD, so a few hundred years after this actually fell, the people were speaking Latin in the church. Nobody understood it. People did not pronounce it correctly, but they were speaking Latin. And this is why Charlemagne's also incredibly important, because he realized that the people weren't speaking this correct. Like he had to take himself some lessons in Latin. Like he wasn't the best at the very beginning, but like he learned this, and then he realized, hey, everybody else is saying this wrong. So Charlemagne actually started education programs so that Latin would be far more widely understood. And that was the beginning of French, as we understand it. Yeah, so French is actually Latin, but Latin on top of German, a Germanic language. And that's where you get a lot of the other Latin languages, because that's what Spanish is. It's Spanish on top of the Germanic and Celtic languages there. You got Romanian, same thing with the Slavs, and Italian is, well, Italian is kind of a mixture of Latin with Lombard German. The Lombard, nobody pays attention to the Lombards, but yeah, no, they're important. Incidentally, they also ruled from them at different points in time. But yeah, any other questions, comments, confusions? Want me to repeat anything?
Well, I'm waiting for the ascent of Constantine.
Okay.
That should be just about now.
Okay. So I will. Ooh, I didn't do a lot of research on that. I figured this would take up all the time. So I'll give you broad strokes. I'll give you broad strokes, at least for now. And that will lead us into where I actually do remember a whole bunch of stuff and where I also wanted to go. So you have four different emperors in four different locations. And I'll remove edict of toleration for now. It's going to be replaced soon enough anyways. But you have four different emperors. Maximian not there, Diocletian not there. Galerius just died. Constantius also not in power. But you have Constantine. So, as things progress and you have, well, various emperors kind of getting into power, kind of settling in, what Constantine does, and Constantine is ruling his father's old territory here. Okay? Basically, when no one's really paying attention, and oh, I have to look up the exact date, but basically when nobody's really paying attention, Constantine decides, I'm going to take everything for myself. So almost out of the blue, you have Constantine moving his armies here after some military buildup. He's moving his armies to take out everybody else. The other three emperors. Well, of course, one of the emperors is more or less on his side, more or less on his side. Sorry, I'm looking up dates. But Constantine is able to take them all out in a very, very quick period of time, when they're not prepared for battle, when they're just, well, yeah, they're just sitting around. So, Civil Wars, this is what, yeah, so Galerius, so he was the emperor here. He was too ill to really do anything. Maxentius, let's see, yeah, he was ruling. Yeah, so Maxentius, he was ruling here. He was trying to go behind Constantine's back with somebody else to form an alliance against him. So Constantine has to go from here to here, take out this area, and oh, give me the date for the battle. Give me the date for the battle. Oh, okay, I have to look this up independently. So the most famous battle that goes on is the Battle of the Milvian Bridge. Give me the battle. There we go. Okay. So the Battle of the Milvian Bridge was in.
What, 315 or something?
Yeah, so October 28th, 312. So Constantine at this time was already favorable to Christianity. Like, there's always debates about how understanding he was of the theology, among other things. But at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, one of the most important battles, so Battle of the Milvian Bridge, to take out the guy who's trying to cut Constantine out of politics in the West. Constantine is about to go across the river on the bridge, and then he has this vision in the sky, and this vision is of the cross, the Christian cross, and he hears a voice saying, "By this sign, conquer."
Yeah, you mean, yeah.
And there are some people doubting that he actually had this vision, blah 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 blah. But in any case, yeah, the popular story, according to Constantine, is that when he was about to cross the bridge in this battle, he had a sign from the one true God saying, "By the sign of the cross, conquer." So Constantine, when he's about to cross the bridge, ordered all his troops to paint the sign of the cross on their shields.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so then he goes over, takes out his enemy in Rome, and now rules over all of this unchallenged, more or less. Like there's still some opposition in this area, which he has to mop up, of course. But he's effectively ruling all this.
So here comes the next question. Was Constantine married already or not? Because his wife is said to be the power behind the throne in respect to making him sympathetic to Christians.
I don't unfortunately I don't. I do generally try to research all this well beforehand, but no, that one I just don't.
It doesn't make the historic book.
No, I'd have to do some dedicated research to find a source on that, but no, unfortunately, I don't know. Anyways, so yeah, he takes out this, and then he also not Maximius. Ooh, that's wrong. Okay. Minus. There we go. I always do that. Okay. So now, after this is all done, this side of the empire still kind of off, still not really appealing to Constantine's vision for the empire, including the persecutions of Christians. So what Constantine eventually does is he comes in and takes out the emperor ruling there. Okay, and yeah, he takes out Maximinus and basically reconfigures the empire again. I'm not going to erase all this and redraw it, but basically all these divisions marking the four parts of the empire, they're now gone for at least this period of time.
Well, he's ruling by himself.
Sort of. His Caesar, so he's an Augustus,
Okay.
because he took over from his father. So he's an Augustus. He still has his subordinate Caesar, but this Caesar now has less power because Constantine wants more.
Okay.
So he basically removes. Sorry, well, no, he doesn't remove him from that, but he has
More
Licinius. Well, sorry, Licinius. He is now in charge of some of the administration and is far less in power than, say, Diocletian originally envisioned his Caesars. So Diocletian ended up dividing everything into four, so everybody had almost equal power in some sense, political and economic. Constantine doesn't do that, because again, he's smart. So Diocletian was smart. He had to take the empire out of political absurdity. And then Constantine, now that the empire was out of political absurdity to some degree, was able to reforge it under one ruler, more or less. And then he's co-reigning with Licinius. And in those two stages, the empire is now basically back to how it was being run when it was run successively about 150 years earlier. Because a lot of the empire, the good emperors, they had co-emperors who were ruling under them, and usually they would be sons or somebody or son-in-laws, and they would be cultivated into emperors in their own right. So once their father or father-in-law died, they could just take over. That was actually the case with, say, Trajan. Emperor Trajan. Trajan is recognized as one of the greatest Roman emperors ever. He co-reigned with the former emperor Nerva for 2 years. And then when Nerva passed away from natural causes, Trajan took over, and then he was able to do a lot because he knew how to administer the empire at that time. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so Constantine had this, took that, eventually was able to take this. So by the time of the Council of Nicaea, all this was under his control. All of it was under his direct control.
But he also moved his capital because we have.
He had to create his own capital. So he wasn't in Nicomedia.
Oh, you know, did, okay.
Because that was the capital beforehand.
Yeah.
And I'm going to very quickly do this to do the political thing, to finish the political matters, and then next week we can get into some of the edicts and the fallout from the persecution and the peace that comes afterwards. Because there's a major major division in the church afterwards. Anyways, so this is Black Sea, this is Black Sea. So what Constantine does is he goes, well, he's trying to figure out, well, what's a good place to rule the empire, this huge empire again. And Rome, he decides, is not the best place to be. Neither is Nicomedia, because it's on one side of the Mediterranean. And he wants to be able to still hear everything going on in this side. So what he does is he goes to this tiny little fishing village called Byzantium, is located here. He thinks, this is a really good place for my capital. So then he lays out, and the legend says that he personally laid out the plans for like the actual Like he was laying down rocks, or I think it was rocks, but he was laying down borders for this is what I want and the borders of my city to be, and this is Constantinople. This is also why in later years, when people are talking about the empire in the east, which is ruled from Constantinople, it's called the Byzantine Empire, because it was originally the fishing village of Byzantium. Yeah. But it's still Roman, because the Romans took over, even though they're speaking Greek. Yeah. But Constantine takes over the fishing village, transforms it into an imperial city and imperial capital, so that it's somewhat in the middle of the empire. You know, that's not in the middle. The middle's over here. It's like, well, they also had different maps back then, and it's this is all weighted because not much is actually happening here. Like these are not problem areas. They're not. Well, this border you could argue, sure, maybe, but this is not a problem area. This is a problem area. This is a huge problem area.
Yeah.
Not problem, not really a problem. So you want to focus in between this area and that area. That's where you put that.
Much more happening there. That's when you look at the Dark Ages, you know.
Yeah. Anyways, so we have to. So yeah, next week I'm going to try and focus on the fallout from the persecution, because there's a new heresy that gets invented. Yay! But yeah, the political situation is far more favorable to Christianity, so we can actually grow and reflect on these things. Okay, so let's pray. Dear Lord, Heavenly Father, we ask you to raise up for us faithful servants to fill the offices of the government in this land and across the entire world, that it may be favorable to your will and beneficial for all the people therein. We ask you, O Lord, to be with all leaders in positions of power, that they may use their power correctly, that they may govern justly, and that they do not encourage or act in war that is only leading to death. We ask you, O Lord, to raise up these faithful servants for the glory of your people and for the protection of your people in the Christian church. In the name of your Son, Jesus Christ our Lord, we pray. Amen.